The world was quiet in those days. Humanity had done something rare among all the voices of the galaxy. It had stayed silent when others shouted. It had stayed still when others marched to war. And it had hidden its fists while others raised theirs. Earth was known as neutral, the planet that traded with all sides but joined none. Humanity became the shopkeepers, the builders, the quiet partners who gave tools but never aimed weapons. And because of this, many thought Earth was weak. Many thought humanity was afraid. But peace has its own cost, and silence has its own dangers for those who remain quiet. Too long are often mistaken for prey. The galaxy was not kind to prey. It began with the signals. At first they came faint, so faint most thought. It was just the static of stars, ordinary background noise that filled the dark between worlds. But then the patterns came repeating, too neat to be random, too sharp to ignore. They echoed in the satellites that circled Earth. They danced across deep space sensors, and they whispered the same message again and again, a code that no one could break at first. Governments dismissed it. The code was meaningless, no words, no pictures, only repeating tones and shapes. But the scientists did not sleep. Some argued it was mathematics, a way to measure human response. Others claimed it was a countdown, a warning hidden in numbers. Some said it was just space playing tricks on human machines, but those voices grew fewer each day because the signals kept coming, and with each signal they grew louder. In cities across Earth, people felt a strange unease, though most never knew why. News did not tell the full story. The governments kept it secret. But fear has a way of spreading through the air, through whispers, through half-truths. People said something was coming. People said the stars were watching. People said Earth's long silence was about to end. In the high orbit above Earth, satellites turned their eyes toward the edge of the solar system, and there they saw something vast, something moving. It was not a comet, not a rock, not a natural wanderer of the void. It was a shadow shaped too perfectly. It reflected light in cold lines like metal plates, and each day it grew closer. Ships from Mars reported strange readings, power surges, communication cutoffs, signals swallowed by interference. Mining crews spoke of flickers of black shapes against the stars, shapes that vanished when eyes tried to focus on them. The leaders of Earth met in secret. Chambers underground, far from the ears of their people. Their voices trembled as they spoke. They knew Earth had avoided war for centuries. They knew neutrality had kept them alive. But now, a new truth pressed down on them. Someone was watching, someone was testing, and the signals were not invitations. They were footsteps coming closer. Humanity was unprepared, though not helpless. Earth had fleets built, not for conquest, but for defense ships, armed only enough to keep pirates away. Weapons built only to discourage, not to destroy. But against what was coming, the leaders knew it was not enough. Still they waited, still. They hoped that whoever sent the signals only wanted to speak. Still they believed that perhaps words could save them. But then the signals stopped. The silence was worse than the noise. The silence felt like a hand closing around Earth's throat. No warnings, no numbers, no patterns, only quiet, deep and endless. It was the quiet of hunters when they crouch low before the strike. It was the quiet of breath held before the blade falls. The first to see it was a deep space probe drifting near the edge of Neptune. Its camera caught the flash of metal like a silver wound opening in the dark. And then the probe was gone, erased without even a scream, only the last image left behind, a fleet emerging from black space like teeth from a shadow. The image reached Earth, and in that moment, every leader, every scientist, every hidden watcher understood Earth's silence was over the galaxy, had found the planet that refused to fight, and now the galaxy would test whether humans could stand or whether they would kneel. The fleet was vast, larger than anything humans had seen, long, spear-shaped ships, black as the void, sharp like weapons, meant not just to kill, but to terrify. They moved in perfect formation, cold and patient, as if they had done this many times before across many worlds. The aerosaurs, that was what other species called them, though few survived long enough to say the name. They were not builders, they were not traders, they were not allies, they were erasers. They erased civilizations that resisted, they erased cultures that would not kneel, they erased until nothing remained but silence and ash. And now they had come to Earth. At first, they did not fire, they did not speak. They only drifted closer, filling human skies with shadows. Their presence was a message. Their silence was a demand: kneel or be destroyed. And though the leaders of Earth debated, some begged for surrender, though some prayed for mercy, humanity as a whole felt the same tremor deep in its blood, the tremor that whispered, "We cannot kneel. Not again. Not ever." But how could a silent planet stand against a storm? Night fell across the Earth, and yet the skies were no longer dark above every city. Satellites showed the same vision, long lines of alien ships blotting out the stars, casting the world in a shadow that stretched from pole to pole. Children pointed to the skies and asked what they were. Adults lied and said nothing, but everyone knew. Humanity was being challenged, and the silence that had once protected Earth now left it naked before the blade. Still, there was a spark, small at first, but real humanity was clever. Humanity had survived worse on its own world: plague, famine, war, fire, flood, and every time it rose again, and perhaps, just perhaps, it would rise again now. But to do that, it would have to break its silence for the first time in centuries. Earth would have to answer, and the answer would decide whether humanity would vanish or stand tall among the stars. The story of Earth's defiance began that night, not with the roar of guns, not with the flash of missiles, but with the quiet decision of a people who had been underestimated for too long. The aerosaurs had come to erase a silent planet, but they would soon learn humanity was never truly silent. It was only waiting for the moment to speak with fire, waiting for the moment to strike, waiting for the moment to show the galaxy that peace does not mean weakness, and silence does not mean fear. The sky was full of shadows, and humanity was about to step into them. The first image of the fleet spread across Earth like a sickness, the black shapes against the stars, long and sharp like knives, no light escaping from them, no message, no sound, only silence. People stared at the pictures on their screens, and they felt something heavy in their stomachs. Some said it was impossible, no force would come this far, only to frighten. But deep down, they all knew the truth. This was not a visit. This was not a warning. This was the enemy arriving with purpose. In the control rooms of Earth, military satellites tracked the ships, but the readings made no sense. The fleet was larger than anything humanity had built. Their weapons glowed with strange energy waves. The computers could not name. Shields rippled across their hulls like water, and every hour more ships appeared, as if the shadows themselves were giving birth to war machines. The leaders of Earth met again in secret chambers underground. The walls thick with steel and silence, but the air was heavy with fear. Some voices shook with anger. "We cannot fight." They said, "We are not ready." Others shouted, "We cannot kneel. If we kneel, we are no longer human." The room filled with arguments, none willing to end in agreement, because no one truly knew what to do. The aliens finally broke their silence. Not with words, not with diplomacy, but with fire. One of their ships drifted close to an old research station orbiting Saturn. The humans on board had no weapons, no defenses. They only studied the storms of the giant planet. But the Eraser ship cut through them without hesitation. The station tore apart in seconds, flames vanishing into the cold dark, only a final broken signal reaching Earth. A scream of static that froze every heart. Now there was no denying the truth. This was war across the world. Fear turned into something sharper. Mothers pulled their children close. Fathers whispered old promises. Soldiers sat in silence, staring at their orders, knowing they might never see their families. Again, humanity had not wanted war, but now it was here. The aerosols sent their first message, not in words but in symbols, broadcast across every screen, every device, their language translated by machines into something all could understand: kneel or be erased. The words repeated again and again across the world, like a hammer striking stone: kneel, or be erased; kneel, or be erased. Some said surrender was the only choice. Some shouted peace must be saved at any cost. But others felt rage rise in their chest. Why should we kneel to those who kill without mercy? Why should we bend when we have done nothing wrong? They said it is better to die standing than to live on our knees. And slowly the voice of resistance grew louder. In the skies, Earth's fleet stirred. They were small compared to the invaders, their weapons weaker, their armor thin. But the captains of those ships remembered the oath they had taken to protect their world, and one ship refused to wait. It was an old cruiser stationed near Mars, not the strongest, not the fastest. But its crew chose defiance. They armed their railguns. They turned their ship toward the nearest erasor destroyer, and they fired. The shot tore across the void metal, screaming faster than thought it struck the alien hull. And for the first time, the erasers felt surprise. The railgun round punched through shields that were said to be unbreakable. The destroyer shuddered, flames erupting from its side, and before the eraser fleet could react, the human cruiser fired again. The second shot split the alien ship in two, and the galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath. On Earth, cheers erupted in bunkers, in cities, in villages. People screamed in joy through their fear. They had seen the impossible. A human ship had drawn blood from the monsters that erased civilizations. The aerosaurs were not untouchable. They could bleed, and if they could bleed, then perhaps they could be defeated. But victory carried a price. The rest of the erasor fleet turned on the lone cruiser. They surrounded it with cold precision beams of burning light, cut through its armor missiles, ripped its hull apart. The crew fought until nothing was left, only wreckage drifting silently into the dark. Yet even in death, they had changed. Everything humanity had proof the enemy was not invincible. The aerosaurs had expected weakness. They had expected surrender, but now they saw defiance, and it made them pause. That pause was small, only moments long, but moments are all humanity needs. Across Earth, engineers rushed to adapt weapons, to study the data from the destroyed cruiser, to search for weakness in the alien shields. Soldiers trained harder, civilians prepared shelters, scientists whispered plans for weapons not yet tested. Humanity had been caught unready, but now it moved with desperate speed. The aerosaurs regrouped. Their message changed no longer: only kneel or be erased. Now it carried another word: resistance will bring suffering. They began targeting not only ships, but satellite stations, even civilian networks. Entire communication systems went dark. Cities lost contact with one another. Fear spread again, but it was a different fear. Now not only of death, but of isolation, cut off from the rest of the world. Still, the people whispered, we saw them fall. We saw the enemy fall, and hope clung to those whispers like fire in dry grass in space. The second wave began. Aerosaur destroyers swept toward Earth's moon bases, smaller than cities, but vital for defense. Human ships scrambled to protect them. One battle-scarred frigate took position between the base and the fleet. It fought like a cornered beast, firing every weapon until its barrels glowed red. Alien beams cut through its hull pieces, tearing away. Yet, somehow it held long enough for civilians to escape the base, evacuated, the people saved, even as the frigate finally broke apart. Stories like these spread faster than the alien broadcasts. Every small act of defiance became a legend told across Networks that still worked, repeated by voices that refused to be silent. The galaxy was watching. Two hidden eyes from other species observed, some shocked, some amused, some afraid, for they had always thought humans would kneel. They had always thought silence meant weakness, but now they saw something else. Humanity was small. Humanity was fragile. But humanity was dangerous in ways the galaxy had forgotten. Humanity was unpredictable. In the great halls of the Erisor fleet, their commanders seethed. Never before had such a primitive species struck them. Never before had prey dared to bite. They promised to make Earth an example, to burn it so completely no one would ever defy them again. Yet even as they planned their vengeance, their caution grew, for the humans had done what others had not. They had broken the illusion of invincibility. Back on Earth, night stretched. Long people could no longer see stars. Only the dark outlines of enemy ships drifting like storms above their world, and still, life continued. Children cried, markets closed, lights flickered, but through it all, a strange fire burned stronger. People were afraid, but they were also angry, and anger is a weapon if it is aimed. The leaders met again, no longer shouting without, and now their voices steadier one by one. They admitted the truth. There is no peace left. There is no silence left. We fight or we vanish. And at last they agreed. Earth would no longer avoid war. Earth would rise to meet it. The second day of invasion ended with skies full of shadows, wreckage floating in orbit, and hope burning like a spark too small to see, but too strong to kill. The Erisors had revealed themselves not as gods, not as eternal hunters, but as enemies. Enemies who could bleed enemies, who could be broken. Humanity had lost ships, it had lost lives, but it had gained something far more dangerous than weapons. It had gained the will to fight. And in the dark above the world, where alien fleets prepared their next strike, humanity whispered one promise into the silence: you wanted us to kneel, but you will see us stand. The wreckage of the cruiser still drifted near Mars, broken pieces tumbling in silence, the last proof of men and women who had refused to kneel. Many thought the Erisors would laugh at such a small victory. Many thought the aliens would see only the weakness of humans. But inside the great black fleet there was no laughter, only anger. The destroyer that had been lost was not the largest, not the strongest, but it had been lost to prey, and prey was not supposed to bite. On Earth, the story of the cruiser spread like fire. Every city, every colony, every soldier whispered the same words: they can be hurt, the Erisors can bleed. The loss of the crew was heavy as grief. Deep, but out of grief came something sharper. Humans were not ready to die quietly. They were not ready to kneel. The silence of Earth had ended, but the enemy did not wait. The Erisors sent their second wave toward the orbit of Earth. A line of ships larger than mountains, each one bristling with weapons that glowed with cruel light. Satellites tried to track them, but most signals were cut. The screens of command centers, filled with static commanders, slammed fists against dead consoles, while the sky above them filled with shadows. Panic grew across the world. Some screamed that surrender was still possible, that humanity could beg for mercy. Others shouted that mercy would never come, and that begging would only make the death slower. In the middle of the shouting came the voice of Admiral Chen, her hair streaked with grey, her voice calm but sharp. She said, "We will fight, not because we want war, but because war has found us." Her words spread across channels carried by soldiers, repeated by civilians, until even the fearful began to believe. Human fleets gathered near Earth, small compared to the invaders, but united: frigates, cruisers, carriers, old ships pulled from docks and patched together every weapon that could be pointed. To the sky was armed. Some were little more than scrap held by hope, but hope itself was fuel, and humanity was burning bright with it. The Erisors did not wait for words. They opened fire beams of energy, like spears of the sun, tearing through orbiting satellites, turning them to sparks in the dark. Earth's defenses. Answered railguns, thundered missiles, streaked upward. Lasers cut lines across the black void, and for the first time in human history, the skies above the planet became a battlefield, a frigate named Horizon. Struck first, its guns tearing into the shields of an Erisor ship, the alien hull rippled under the impact. Its shield flickered and then failed. The human crew screamed in triumph as their second barrage split the alien ship apart, fragments of metal burning as they fell toward Earth's atmosphere. The people below watched streaks of light across the sky like falling stars, and they cheered, not knowing it was the wreckage of the enemy, but victory brought fury. The Erisor fleet closed in weapons burning through human ships one by one. The Horizon itself took a direct hit, the explosion lighting up the void. The cheers turned to silence, then to anger. No one forgot the flash of its death. Still the humans fought harder every death. A reason to fight. More railguns roared, more missiles screamed into the Black One carrier, unleashed a swarm of drones, tiny compared to the alien ships. But fast and relentless, they struck the enemy shields again and again, until one destroyer buckled under the weight of impacts. The galaxy was watching unseen eyes in hidden corners of space species that had long believed Earth was nothing, now watched with disbelief. Humans were fighting back, and not only surviving but striking blows against the most feared hunters of the stars. On the surface of Earth, civilians huddled in shelters, power-cut communications. Dead, but they still listened through emergency radios, the voices of soldiers reporting strikes. Every voice, shaky but strong mothers, held their children close, telling them stories of warriors from Earth's past. Fathers whispered that this was their time to rise. Young people watched the skies and promised that if the fight came to the ground, they would not run. They would stand inside the Erisor flagship. The commander spoke with rage. How could such a young species resist? How could their weapons pierce shields built to withstand empires? The answer unsettled them. Humans were unpredictable. Humans fought with recklessness that could not be measured by logic. Their weapons were simple, but their will was strange. Their silence had hidden not weakness, but patience. Patience that was now broken and turned into fury. The battle raged for hours, debris filling the orbit of Earth. Human ships shattered, but alien ships fell too, each fall sending ripples of hope across the planet, each flash a reminder that the invincible could be hurt. One moment stood out above all. A small corvette named Valor found itself alone between an Erisor battleship and Earth. The alien ship charged weapons strong enough to burn a continent from orbit, but the Valor did not retreat. Instead, it charged forward its captain, knowing there was no chance of survival, but also knowing that if they did not act, Earth below would burn. The corvette fired every missile, every gun ramming into the alien shields, until the ship itself tore apart in a final explosion. The blast ripped through the enemy's core. The battleship shuddered, then split in two, drifting dead into the void. The death of the Valor echoed across Earth, her name repeated by voices in bunkers, in ships, in broken stations. Valor, Valor, Valor. It became more than a ship. It became a promise. Humanity would not stop fighting. The Erisors began to pull back, not retreating fully, but shifting, regrouping their perfect formation, broken there. Silence now filled with frustration. They had expected quick surrender. They had expected fear to choke humanity into submission. Instead, they found themselves bleeding against prey that refused to bow on Earth. The leaders gathered once more. Admiral Chen, her voice steady, said, "We have shown them we can fight, but the cost has only begun. The enemy will return stronger than before, and we must be ready. No more hiding, no more silence. Every factory, every dockyard, every lab must prepare for war. Earth is no longer neutral. Earth is at war. And the galaxy will remember civilians volunteered in masses, pilots, engineers, medics, even artists and storytellers, each offering what they could, because the fight was no longer only about survival. It was about identity. Humanity would prove that silence did not mean fear, and that peace did not mean weakness. They would prove it with fire and steel. The night sky no longer belonged to stars. It belonged to shadows broken by streaks of fire each. But a reminder that the battle was not over each one. A reminder that the enemy still watched above, waiting, planning, hungering. But for the first time, the Erosaurs had tasted something they had never tasted before: doubt. And doubt is deadly even for conquerors. The wreckage of human ships floated in orbit, silent tombs of those who had given everything, but their sacrifice burned brighter than the wreckage itself. Every civilian who saw the falling debris knew it was not only loss, it was proof. Proof that humanity could defy the galaxy's most feared hunters. Proof that Earth had spoken not with words, but with fire and blood. The story of Earth was no longer the story of silence. It was the story of defiance. And every soldier, every child, every watching ally or enemy knew the fight had only just begun. The shadows still covered the skies, but within those shadows something new was born. Not fear, not despair, but determination, unyielding and unbroken. And in the cold dark of space, the Erasers prepared their next strike, their commanders vowing that this time Earth would not rise from the ashes, but deep inside their hearts, though they would never admit it. They feared that humanity was not like the others they had erased. They feared that perhaps this prey was something far more dangerous. They feared that perhaps humanity was a predator in disguise. The galaxy whispered the name of Earth. It carried through hidden networks across merchant ships, smugglers, stations, and great halls of power. A quiet planet had struck the most feared enemy in known space and lived to tell the story. Some called it madness, some called it courage, many called it impossible. But all agreed on one thing: the silence of Earth had ended. In the cold chambers of distant worlds, leaders of other species gathered, their voices low, their eyes wary. They asked the same questions. Should we help them? Should we wait? Should we hope the Erosaurs crush them quickly? The answers were not the same. Some feared the Erosaurs too much to even speak aloud. Others felt curiosity rising like a dangerous flame. If humans could fight, then perhaps others could too, but none were ready to commit. None were ready to reveal their hand. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what humanity would become: prey destroyed or predator rising. On Earth, the mood was different. The skies were still filled with alien shadows. Wreckage still drifted above cities, and the names of the fallen were still whispered with grief. But the spirit of the people had changed. Fear had not left, but it had been reshaped into anger and resolve. Factories once silent turned to life, weapons built faster than ever, research labs filled with strange experiments, new shields, new guns, new machines that had never been tested before. Every hand worked, every mind burned, because all knew the next wave would come, and it would come. Soon Admiral Chen stood before a crowd of officers, her voice steady as stone. She said, "The Erosaurs thought us weak. They thought us silent. They thought us afraid. We showed them they were wrong, and we will show them again." The officers repeated her words like a vow, and across the network civilians repeated them too. The vow spread like fire. Earth would fight, Earth would not kneel. But not all were united in the shadows of power. Politicians argued. Still some whispered of surrender, hidden in secret meetings. They said humanity had bled too much already, that no victory was possible against an enemy who had erased entire empires. Before they said Earth was foolish to fight back, their voices, soft but sharp, like knives cutting into the resolve of others. The Erosaurs themselves felt that doubt, the loss of their ships, echoed through there. Fleet commanders in their dark chambers spoke of punishment. They demanded Earth be burned so completely that the galaxy would remember the lesson for 1,000 years. They gathered their largest ships. They called for weapons not yet used in this system, and they prepared their second great strike in orbit above Jupiter. Human scouts caught the first signs, massive engines, brighter than suns moving with perfect formation. The second wave was coming larger, faster, heavier than before. Admiral Chen saw the reports. Her hands tightening on the table, she whispered, "We are not ready," but her eyes burned with fire as she added, "We will never be ready, and still we will fight." Meanwhile, on Earth, civilians prepared shelters were dug deeper tunnels. Widened schools turned into safe houses, doctors trained by the thousands, knowing soon there would be more wounded than beds to hold them. Children practiced hiding drills, their eyes wide with fear, but also with strange courage. Even they knew this. It was not a time to be silent. Far away in hidden systems, the galaxy kept watching. A council of traders debated if humanity survived, they might become powerful allies. If humanity fell, they would be nothing more than ash. Some wanted to reach out secretly, to offer weapons, information, even soldiers. But fear of the aerosaurs weighed heavily on them. Many decided to wait to see if Earth could endure the next storm. The storm came at last. The aerosaur fleet poured into the system like a tide of black ships. Their hulls gleaming with cruel light, they did not speak, they did not send messages. They only advanced weapons, glowing like suns ready to erase everything in their path. Human fleets rose to meet them, smaller, weaker, but unbroken. Every ship armed, every soldier prepared railguns, loaded missiles, primed drones, swarming in silence waiting for the order. Then Admiral Chen gave it her voice, calm, steady fire. The void erupted. Missiles streaked, railguns roared, lasers carved. The dark human ships darted like wolves striking, then vanishing using speed against the bulk of the aerosaur fleet. The first impacts shook the alien shields. Some broke, others bent, and once again the impossible happened. Human weapons pierced through one destroyer, then another, explosions blooming in the void, like flowers of fire on Earth. People watched the skies through screens, through windows. They saw the flashes high above like storms. They cheered with each streak of light, praying it meant victory, praying their world would survive another day. But the aerosaurs were not idle. Their response was swift, brutal beams of pure destruction cut through human frigates. Entire squadrons vanished. In seconds, carriers ripped apart, drones silenced in waves. The Hiraisa commanders snarled, no more patience, no more games. This prey would be shattered. This time, they would not rise again. The battle raged hour after hour, space littered with burning. Wrecks, the cries of the dying carried through broken comms. But humanity refused to yield. Ships fought until their last breath. Soldiers fired until their weapons were gone, then rammed their ships into the enemy, turning death into a final strike that sent more aerosaur vessels burning. Amid the chaos, one human ship stood out, the Defender, an old battleship thought too slow, too outdated, but its captain refused to retreat. He turned his massive guns on the flagship of the aerosaur fleet, every shot shaking the void shields buckling under the relentless storm. Finally, a missile struck the heart of the enemy vessel. The flagship shuddered, flames ripping across its hull. Silence followed for only a second, then the ship split apart its pieces. Drifting lifeless into the black, the humans screamed with triumph, their voices echoing across every channel. The loss of the flagship rippled through the aerosaur fleet. Never before had such prey struck such a blow. Never before had they lost so much. To a species so young, anger turned to fury, and fury turned to mistakes. Their perfect formation broke. Commanders shouted over one another, their ships clashing in confusion, and humanity seized the moment. Every gun, every missile, every drone struck. At once, wave after wave, until the aerosaurs finally pulled back, not defeated, but forced to retreat into the shadows of space. The battle ended, but victory was bitter. The orbit of Earth was filled with wreckage. Thousands lost ships, gone, names added. To lists that would be remembered for generations. Admiral Chen stood in silence, her face lined with grief, but when she spoke, her voice was steel again. "They will come back stronger," she said, "but so will we. We are no longer prey. We are defenders of our world, and the galaxy will see it." On Earth, people poured into the streets, even under skies still filled with burning debris. They shouted, they sang, they cried, but their voices carried one truth. Humanity had stood. Humanity had struck humanity, had refused to kneel across the galaxy. The whispers grew louder. Species once silent now spoke in secret meetings. Some asked, could we ally with them? Could we fight beside them? Others asked, should we fear them for a species that could wound the irises might one day rise beyond control? The galaxy no longer saw Earth as silent. The galaxy saw Earth as dangerous. In the dark chambers of the Erisor fleet, the commanders seethed. Their pride wounded their fury, endless. They promised the next. Strike would not be a battle, it would be annihilation. They would break Earth not only with ships, but with terror from within. They would show the galaxy that no prey, no matter how defiant, could stand against them, and they began to prepare their revenge on Earth. The people did not know the details, but they felt the weight of what was coming. The war was not ending. It was only beginning, and the shadows above still lingered heavy dark, full of promise and threat. But in every shelter, every home, every bunker, humanity held a truth tighter than fear. They had fought, and they had endured. They had seen the hunters bleed. They had seen the invincible retreat, and they whispered to themselves and to the stars, they will return. But so will we. The world that had once been silent was silent no more, and the galaxy trembled at the sound of Earth's rising voice. The wreckage of ships still burned in the night sky, pieces of metal falling like dying stars, some crashing into oceans, some streaking across mountains. People on Earth looked up and saw the reminders of the great battle above. They whispered the names of the ships that were gone. They whispered the names of the crews who had fought until nothing was left but broken light. Humanity had struck down the flagship of the Erisors, but no one thought it was over. No one thought the hunters would leave their prey alive. In command centers, underground maps of the system glowed with red markers. The Eraser fleet had pulled back, but not far. Their formations regrouped just outside the range of Earth's defenses, waiting, watching, gathering strength. Admiral Chen stood with her officers, her eyes dark with sleeplessness. She said, "They are not retreating, they are preparing. And when they return, it will not be only to fight in orbit, it will be to strike the ground itself." Silence filled the room. No one doubted her words. The enemy had been wounded, and now it would return with fury. On the surface, civilians hurried deeper into shelters. Drills became real children, carried packs on their backs. Families clutched one another and waited for alarms to sound. Soldiers dug trenches and placed artillery in the hills. Old bases abandoned for years were reopened, turned into strongholds. Every weapon, every tank, every fighter jet that could still fly was pulled into service. This was no longer a war far away in the stars. This was a war that would come to the soil of Earth itself. The first sign came over the Pacific sky. Watchers saw shapes break from the Erisor fleet, giant carriers dropping toward the atmosphere. They burned through the air, leaving trails of fire, thousands of them each carrying legions of soldiers, machines, beasts humanity had never seen before. Sirens wailed across cities. Voices shouted into radios, "They are landing, they are coming down." In a valley outside Shanghai, soldiers stood ready. Their hands trembling around rifles, tanks aimed their cannons at the dark sky above. And then the first Eraser dropships roared into the air, landing with a thunder that shook the ground. Their hulls cracked open, and from them poured creatures tall, armored, their bodies like moving blades, their weapons glowing with cruel light. The defenders opened. Fire bullets and shells tearing into the first wave, sparks flying, screams rising. Some aliens fell, but more came behind them, advancing without fear, without pause. The ground shook as machines followed massive walkers with legs like towers, cannons. Mounted on their backs, fire spitting from their arms. Every step crushed earth into dust. The human tanks fired missiles, streaked and struck explosions, ripping across the battlefield. One walker toppled, crashing into its own troops. Cheers rose, but quickly died as more walkers replaced it. The line of machines, endless, civilians trapped in nearby towns, ran through streets, bombs falling around them, buildings collapsing, mothers carried children through smoke, fathers dragged the wounded through. Fire soldiers stayed behind to hold the line, buying minutes for the people to escape every second, paid with blood in North America. The same scene unfolded, alien ships cutting through clouds, landing across the plains, vast numbers of soldiers spreading. Like a flood, defenders rallied cities, turned into fortresses. Skyscrapers became sniper towers, highways filled with barricades. The aerosaurs advanced, relentless, but humanity met them in every street, every alley, every rooftop, even as cities burned. The fight never stopped above Earth. The last of the defense fleet, still in orbit, tried to stop the landings. Destroyers turned their guns on the dropships. Missiles screamed into the void. Many alien craft were torn apart before they could reach. The surface fireballs lighting up the night skies, but still too many broke through the atmosphere. Too many reached the ground. The Erisa commanders watched with cold satisfaction from their ships. This was how prey should be broken on the ground, where there was no escape. But what they did not expect was how humans fought. There was no surrender, no fleeing to safety. Even when the enemy marched through fire, humans struck back with everything they had. Children too young to fight carried water and ammunition. Old men built barricades with their bare hands. Wounded soldiers refused to leave their posts. One pilot, out of ammunition, rammed his jet into a walker and took it down in a blazing sacrifice. The aerosaurs began to feel something. Knew something unfamiliar: frustration. In South America, a jungle base hidden for decades opened its doors. Inside were experimental weapons, long thought too unstable to use. Desperate scientists pushed them into action. Beams of raw plasma tearing. Through aerosaur formations, the jungle lit up like a second sun. Entire squads of aliens melted in the blast. Human soldiers cheered, but the scientists wept, knowing the weapon was burning itself out. Even in death, it gave them victory for a moment. Across Europe, battles raged through ancient streets. Tanks rolled past ruined cathedrals. Gunfire echoed in the halls of history. Bridges became choke points, rivers ran dark with smoke, but the defenders refused to break every time the aerosaurs advanced. The humans struck from shadows, ambush after ambush, turning every stone into a weapon, every street into a trap. The battle for Earth stretched for days. Fire covered the skies, the ground shook with endless clashes, but the story began to change small. Victories gathered into something larger in Africa. A column of aerosaur machines was destroyed when human engineers lured them into an old volcanic crater, then detonated charges that buried them under molten rock in the Middle East Soldiers' Inn. The desert used storms of sand to blind the enemy, striking with rockets, then vanishing before the aliens could respond. Everywhere the Erisas turned, they found resistance more fierce than expected, more stubborn than their records had warned in. The chambers of the Erisa fleet commanders shouted, their voices sharp with anger. Humanity should have been broken by now. They should have been begging for mercy. Instead, the humans grew stronger with each hour, adapting, turning the chaos of battle into a weapon, fighting in ways no logic could predict. One commander slammed his claw against the table and snarled. They are not prey, they are poison. They infect everything they touch. But another voice, quieter, whispered, what if they are something? More on Earth, Admiral Chen moved among the front lines, her uniform stained with dust, her voice steady in the chaos. She spoke to soldiers with calm words. She told them they were not only defending their homes, they were defending the right of humanity. To exist in the galaxy, every soldier who heard her carried those words into battle and fought harder because of them. The aerosaurs unleashed new horrors, bioengineered beasts with claws like swords' wings that blotted out the sky. They sent swarms of machines, tiny and sharp, cutting through armor with ease. But every horror met human defiance, beasts brought down with chains of grenades, swarms burned by firestorms set by desperate defenders. Even as blood filled the earth, the humans refused. To yield, civilians told their own stories in the ruins of a hospital. Nurses carried the wounded across battlefields, while shells rained down in a ruined school. Children sang to keep from crying. Their voices carried to soldiers nearby, giving them strength in the dark. One village, trapped by enemy soldiers, fought with farming tools, with knives, with fire, until the last alien in the valley fell dead. These stories spread faster than fear and turned into legends, living proof that humanity could never be erased. Days passed and the battle reached its peak. The aerosaurs poured more troops, more ships, more machines onto the soil of Earth, but humanity did not break. They bent, they bled, they burned, but they stood in every land, on every front. The hunters expected silence, but what they found was a roar. At last the aerosaur commanders realized their mistake. Earth was not like the others. They had erased. Earth was different. Every strike only created more resistance. Every wound only sharpened the rage of the defenders, and though they had landed armies across the world, they could not crush the spirit of the humans. The commanders snarled in anger, but behind their rage there was unease. If Earth could fight like this against such odds, what would happen if they gained more allies? What would happen if the galaxy itself decided to stand with them on the ground? Smoke covered the skies, cities lay in ruin. But humanity still held its lines. Admiral Chen stood above a battlefield, her voice carried through broken comms to soldiers and civilians alike. She said they came to break us, but instead they have shown us who we are. We are not silent. We are not weak. We are not prey. We are humanity, and we will endure. The Battle of Earth was not over. The aerosaurs still swarmed across continents. Their fleets still darkened the stars, but something had changed. The invincible had bled. The hunters had stumbled. The people of Earth had proven that even in fire, even in ashes, they could not be erased. And in the quiet between battles, as smoke drifted across broken cities, civilians whispered to one another. They thought we would kneel, but we are still standing, and as long as we stand, we will never fall. Smoke still curled across the continents. Broken cities glowed in the night like burning scars, and the air carried the sound of endless battle. Humans had stood their ground in every land, from the mountains of Asia to the deserts of Africa, from the ruins of Europe to the jungles of South America. Still the aerosaurs kept coming. Their ships still darkened the skies, their machines still marched across the soil, yet something had changed, deep within the heart of Earth, in secret bunkers long forgotten, hidden beneath mountains and oceans. A plan was waking, a weapon born not of desperation, but of preparation. For decades before the invasion, a small circle of scientists, soldiers, and leaders had feared that Earth's silence would one day be broken. They built something hidden from the world, even from most governments. It was called Project Sentinel, a weapon not of destruction alone, but of survival, a weapon that could shift the balance of war. Admiral Chen had known of it, but she had kept it secret until now, as alien armies threatened to choke the last breath from humanity. She gave the order, unlock Sentinel. Beneath the Rocky Mountains, a vast chamber opened inside it. Engines roared for the first time in years. Massive reactors glowed with blue fire. Soldiers and engineers scrambled across walkways, activating systems long left in darkness. At the center of the chamber stood the weapon itself. Not one machine, but many sleek ships, smaller than destroyers, but sharper, faster, built with technology. Humans had sworn never to use because it was too dangerous hybrid technology crafted from fragments of alien wrecks, gathered in secret from old crashes, from silent wars that had never been spoken of. The ships pulsed with strange light, part human, part alien, and entirely unknown. Captain Mara Vance stood at the front of the project, her face scarred from battles of the last weeks. She placed her hand against the cold hull of one ship, her voice low when she said, "This is it. This is what we've been." Hiding Admiral Chen's voice came over the comm, steady and sharp. "Earth is burning, Mara. Take Sentinel and strike hard. Let them see what humanity can do." The ships of Sentinel launched into the sky, leaving the hidden chamber, their engines ripping. The clouds apart as they rose, civilians hiding in ruins looked up and gasped when they saw them streaking overhead like silver arrows, burning with unnatural fire. Whispers spread across the radios. Something new is rising, something new is fighting. For us, above Earth, the Eraser fleet adjusted their formation, ready to meet what they thought was another desperate wave of human ships. But when the Sentinels reached orbit, the hunters realized their mistake. These were not ordinary craft. They moved. Too fast, too sharp, turning at impossible angles, weapons firing in bursts of light that pierced alien shields like paper. The first Eraser cruiser struck by Sentinel fire, shattered in a blaze of fire, its wreckage drifting into the void. The Eraser. Commanders roared in rage, ordering their fleets to swarm the new ships. But the Sentinels danced through their fire beams, missing missiles, outrun lasers, dodged a dozen alien ships, fell within minutes, each one torn apart by weapons no human should have possessed. Every explosion lit up the dark sky above Earth, every flash a sign that humanity had risen with something more powerful than anyone imagined. On the ground, soldiers and civilians watched the skies and cheered for the first time in days. Hope burned brighter than fire. People shouted the name Sentinel again and again, carrying it across the battlefield like a war cry. But with hope came fear, because the ships were not perfect inside their cockpits. Pilots felt the strain of controlling machines that pulsed with alien power. Mara gripped her controls, sweat on her brow. Every turn felt like the ship was alive, like it was trying to guide her instead of the other way. She whispered to herself, "Stay with me, stay mine," and forced the ship to obey. Other pilots screamed over the comm as their minds buckled under the strange connection. Some ships falling into fire because their pilots could not hold control. Sentinel was powerful, but dangerous, a blade that could cut its wielder as easily as the enemy. Admiral Chen knew the risk, but she also knew the truth. Humanity could not win this war by fighting fair against the Erasers. Their strength was too great. Only by using the unexpected, only by walking the line between brilliance and madness could Earth survive. The battle above Earth turned the tide. Eraser formations broke under the onslaught of the Sentinels, their commanders shocked that prey could wield such power. One commander snarled, "This is impossible. They should not have this." Another hissed, "They stole it, they twisted it. They are not prey, they are thieves." Still, the fear lingered because whatever the humans had done, it was working. Yet the Erasers were not without response. Their fleets opened great bays, unleashing their most terrible weapons, ships larger than mountains, carriers of annihilation. They had not planned to use them against Earth, because they had believed Earth did not deserve such power. But now, with Sentinel tearing through their lines, they unleashed everything. Beams larger than cities roared toward Earth, cutting through clouds, striking oceans and mountains. Whole islands shattered, whole valleys turned to glass, millions of lives lost in minutes. The planet screamed, but still the Sentinels fought above, refusing to break. Mara Vance pushed her ship harder each moment. The alien energy inside it tore at her mind. She felt voices, whispers, like echoes of something not human, pressing against her thoughts, urging her to let go, to merge with the machine. She bit her lip until it bled and forced herself to stay human. She fired again, ripping through another enemy ship. Her voice ragged over the comm, saying, "We hold, we don't stop, not now, not ever on Earth." The battle lines shifted. Human forces pushed back against ground troops aided by new fire raining from the skies. The Sentinels destroyed key Erisor ships, cutting off supply lines, cutting off reinforcements slowly. But surely, the balance began to tilt for the first time since the invasion began. The Erisors were not only bleeding, they were losing, but victory carried a shadow. Scientists monitoring the Sentinels saw what the pilots felt. The alien power was not stable. It was consuming them, binding them to the machines too deeply if they flew too long. They would lose themselves, become part of the ships forever. Their voices gone, their minds erased. When Chen heard this, she stood silent for a long moment, then whispered, "Tell them anyway. Tell them the truth." The message spread across the comms, and Mara listened as the scientist said, "Every minute you fly, you give a piece of yourself. If you stay too long, you will not return." Mara closed her eyes, then opened them calm and certain. She said, "Then we give everything." The Sentinels pushed into the heart of the Erisor fleet, blazing like a storm of fire, tearing through battleships, breaking the enemy line. Mara's ship led the charge, weaving between massive cannons, her weapons ripping open the core of the largest Erisor vessel. The explosion lit the void brighter than a sun. The Erisor fleet shuddered, breaking apart, retreating in chaos, hunters fleeing from prey. On Earth, people poured from shelters to watch the retreating fleet with their own eyes. Children pointed at the sky, shouting that the monsters were running. Soldiers raised rifles in the air, roaring with triumph. Humanity had survived the greatest strike yet. But even as cheers filled the world, whispers of fear remained, because everyone knew the Erisors would return. They would return with even greater fury, and Sentinel, though powerful, carried its own doom. Mara's ship drifted among the stars, her body slumped in the cockpit, her mind tangled with the alien machine. She could hear voices, whispers, not of humans, but of something older, something watching. She forced herself to breathe, forced herself to hold to her name, her memory, her humanity. In the silence, she whispered, "I am Mara Vance. I am human. I will not be erased." The retreat of the Erisors was not an end, but a pause, a wound, not a death. Admiral Chen stood before her weary soldiers and said, "We have shown them what we can do, but they will return, and when they do, we must be ready. We must rise again." She raised her hand to the sky where wreckage still burned and added, "They thought us prey. They thought us silent. Now they know we are defenders, and we will never fall." In the galaxies beyond, the Erisors watched and listened. Other species watched too, and for the first time they saw humans not as prey, not as children, but as warriors, dangerous and defiant. Some whispered in fear, some whispered in hope, but none could ignore the truth. Earth had risen. The Battle of Sentinel was written into the memory of humanity, not as victory alone, but as a warning. Power had been unleashed that could not be controlled. Pilots had given their minds, their lives, to turn the tide. Civilians cheered, but leaders trembled, knowing the weapon that saved them might also destroy them. Still, humanity had no choice. They would sharpen the blade and use it again, because survival demanded nothing less. The war was not over. It had only begun. And in the quiet aftermath, as the fires cooled and the skies cleared, the world held its breath, waiting for the next shadow to fall, waiting for the hunters to strike again, waiting to see if the defenders of Earth could endure what was yet to come. In the days after the battle, the skies over Earth were clearer. Pieces of broken alien ships drifted in orbit like black scars, some glowing with dying fire, some silent as tombs. People on the ground lifted their eyes, and for the first time since the invasion began, they saw not endless shadows, but fragments. Proof that the enemy could bleed, proof that Earth could stand yet with every piece of wreckage. There was also dread, for everyone knew the Erisors would not forgive, they would not forget, they would come back. Admiral Chen did not sleep. Her command center still glowed with maps of the world. Every continent marked with wounds, every ocean marked with ships. She stood silent watching as her officers argued. Some demanded they rebuild the Sentinel fleet quickly. Others begged her to destroy what remained, calling it too dangerous. She listened to all voices and gave none an answer, for she knew the truth. Humanity could not survive without the Sentinels, but every pilot who entered those ships risked losing themselves forever. Mara Vance still lived, but not unchanged. She was brought back from orbit, her body weak, her mind haunted. She spent hours in silence, staring at walls, hearing whispers that no one else could hear. She walked among soldiers who cheered her name, but inside she felt she was already half gone, part of her tied forever to the alien machine that had carried her through fire. Yet when Admiral Chen visited Mara, lifted her eyes sharp and defiant, and said, "I can still fight." Chen nodded, knowing the price Mara had already paid, but knowing also that Earth would need her again. Far beyond Earth, the galaxy trembled for news of the battle spread across hidden networks and ancient channels. The Erisors had been forced to retreat for the first time in generations, their fleet shattered by prey they had thought weak. Other species heard the whispers, some with hope, some with fear. In distant systems, voices gathered in secret councils, debating the rise of humanity. On the world of the Zayari, their leaders sat in high towers, their wings folded across their shoulders. They spoke in sharp tones, saying, "The humans are dangerous. They are unstable. They use power they do not understand. They must be destroyed before they grow stronger." Yet others among them whispered, "Maybe we should wait. Maybe we should watch for. If humans can stand against the Erisors, perhaps they can protect us too." In the deep halls of the Torgani elders gathered their voices low as stone. They remembered ancient wars against the Erisors, wars they had lost long ago. They spoke of humanity. As a spark in the dark, one elder said, "Sparks die quickly." Another said, "Sparks can become fire. Perhaps this is the fire we have been waiting for." The Galactic Council, long silent, long divided, began to stir. No species wished to admit they feared the erasers, yet now with humanity standing bloodied but alive, the balance shifted. Whispers of alliance began, whispers of war began. But the Council knew one truth: whatever path they chose, humanity could no longer be ignored. The erasers too gathered. In their vast throne ships, commanders with faces like carved obsidian, voices like thunder. They argued in rage over how prey could have wounded them. Some demanded immediate annihilation, calling for every weapon, every fleet to crush Earth until nothing remained. Others urged caution, for they had seen the Sentinels' power, they had seen alien fire wielded by human hands, and they feared what else humanity might uncover. Their leader, a figure known only as the Prime Shadow, spoke last his voice. Like a blade, he said, "They think themselves strong because of stolen fire. They think themselves defenders, but they are only thieves. We will return, not with ships, not with shadows, but with the storm. We will tear them apart until their world is dust and their name is forgotten. Prepare the annihilation fleets. Humanity will be erased." Back on Earth, preparations began, every nation sending what remained of its strength into rebuilding defenses. New walls rose around cities, underground bunkers were expanded, orbital platforms reforged from wreckage. Admiral Chen pushed her people harder than ever, saying, "We have wounded them, but we have not won. They will return. And when they do, we must be more than survivors. We must be unbreakable." Mara Vance trained new pilots for the Sentinel ships, each one chosen for strength of mind. And will she warned them again and again, "Once you step inside, it will change you. Once you fly too long, you may never come back." Some pilots hesitated, some left. But others stayed their eyes hard, knowing the risk, yet willing to give all for Earth. One young pilot asked Mara, "How do you endure the whispers?" She answered simply, "I remember my name." Civilians, too, joined the fight. Engineers built weapons from scrap. Scientists studied alien wreckage. Farmers gave food, miners gave fuel. The whole planet bent itself toward survival. Children painted sentinel symbols on broken walls. People sang songs of defiance in ruined streets. The spirit of Earth grew harder, sharper, stronger. Yet shadows remained. One night as Mara slept, she dreamed of stars burning. She dreamed of voices calling her deeper into the ship, deeper into power. She woke with her hands trembling, her reflection in the mirror, not quite her own. She wondered how much longer she could hold, but when she looked out at the dawn, she whispered again, "I am human," and forced herself forward. Above Earth, fragments of alien wreckage still drifted. One piece larger than the rest caught the attention of scientists. They brought it down with great effort, hiding it in a remote base. When they studied it, they found not only weapons, but something stranger. A shard of alien memory patterns carved into crystal data that whispered of the Erosaur's origins. Scientists argued whether to open it, whether to risk the knowledge inside. Chen herself came to see it. She placed her hand on the cold crystal and said, "If this gives us an edge, we must use it no matter the danger." Whispers spread among the people that Earth now held the heart of the enemy. Whispers that if unlocked, it could change everything. Mara heard these whispers too, and felt the same dread as when she touched her sentinel ship. She knew power always came with a price. As weeks passed, the skies remained quiet. No new fleets came. Some began to hope the Erosaurs would not return. Some even dared to laugh again. But Chen knew better. She gathered her officers and said, "They are watching us. They are waiting for us to grow careless. They will return not in days, not in weeks, but soon. And when they do, it will be the storm of storms." Her words proved true. For deep in the void, far beyond human eyes, the Erosaur annihilation fleets began to gather. Titans of war larger than moons, engines that burned brighter than suns, their shadows already stretching toward Earth. The storm was coming, and even with sentinels, even with unity, humanity would face a trial greater than any before. But Earth was no longer the silent planet. Earth was no longer prey. Now it was the spark that lit the dark. Now it was the voice that broke silence. Now it was the defender. And as the people of Earth lifted their eyes once more to the stars, they knew one truth. Whatever came next, they would not kneel, they would not break, they would fight until the very last breath, and perhaps in that defiance they would become something greater than even the galaxy imagined. The hunters were returning, but the prey was ready, and this time the shadows would meet fire. The quiet before the storm was heavy across Earth's skies that had once burned with falling ships, now seemed too calm, too silent. People went about their days, but always with one eye upward, waiting for the first shadow to return. Admiral Chen felt it in her bones. Every map, every whisper, every signal told her the Erosaurs were not finished. They were gathering strength somewhere beyond sight, and when they came, it would not be as before. It would be with fury in underground bunkers and mountain fortresses. Soldiers trained until their bodies shook. Children learned drills faster than games. Civilians built shelters and carried supplies. No one on Earth doubted what was coming. Humanity had wounded the hunters, and now the hunters would strike back with everything they had. Yet there was no despair in the people, only steel, only fire. Mara Vance spent long hours inside her sentinel ship, sometimes standing at its core in silence, sometimes flying above ruined landscapes, training new pilots who followed her every command. Her face had grown colder, her eyes darker. Whispers still clawed at her mind, each day heavier, but she fought them with sheer will, repeating to herself again and again, "I am human, I am still human." The new pilots asked her what the sentinels felt like, and she always answered, "Like holding fire and knowing it wants to burn you too." The shard of alien memory discovered in the wreckage had become Earth's most Dangerous secret scientists labored over it, day and night, lines of alien code flickering across their screens, patterns that bent minds and broke machines. Sometimes a researcher would collapse, screaming their mind filled with things no human was. Meant to see, yet through pain and sacrifice, they unlocked pieces of truth. The Erisors were not only conquerors, they were creators. They had once built life to serve them, armies designed to obey, but something long ago had turned against them. Mara listened to this with unease, wondering if humanity had now stepped into the same path. Tools of fire destined to rebel. Admiral Chen ordered the research sealed away from all but a few minds. She knew knowledge itself could destroy them if handled wrong. But she also knew that if the Erisors returned with a storm, humanity would need every possible weapon. Then came the day when the sky trembled. A signal struck Earth like thunder. Deep sensors picked up movement at the edge of the system. Thousands of ships moving as one, a tide of war greater than any before. Chen stood before her officers, the screen before them, showing wave upon wave of red markers blotting out the stars. She said, "They are here." The annihilation fleets entered the system. There, ships vast beyond measure, some larger than cities, their weapons shining like suns. The very space around them seemed to bend as they moved like an endless wall of shadow, pushing toward Earth. Panic filled the channels, voices shouting fear, but Chen silenced them with one command: every ship, every weapon to position, every sentinel pilot to launch. Humanity stands now. Across the world, alarms screamed, sirens wailed, people flooded into bunkers, soldiers rushed to their stations, anti-orbital cannons lifted their barrels to the sky, sentinel ships rose from hidden hangars, wings glowing with strange fire. Mara at the front, her voice calm through comms, steadying every trembling hand. She said, "We have faced them before, we have bled, we have lost. But today we show them Earth cannot be erased. Hold the line." The first clash shook the heavens. Human fleets launched from orbit, every missile, every gun roaring into the dark. Erisor ships answered with beams that cut space apart. Entire destroyers were sliced in half, screams echoing through comms. Mara led her squadron of sentinels into the fire, weaving through beams, striking with blasts of alien light. Her ship moved like a living storm, cutting enemy cruisers apart. But with each strike, the whispers in her mind grew louder, voices urging her to let go, to surrender herself fully to the power. She fought back, gritting her teeth, whispering her own name again and again. On the ground, beams from orbit rained down, cities shaking under. Fire defense cannons lit the sky, shooting streaks of light that punched holes in the falling storm. In Africa, soldiers fought in deserts, turning every canyon into a trap. In Europe, fighters roared above shattered cathedrals, striking enemy dropships before they could release their cargo. In North America, trenches and missile fields turned plains into killing zones. Across every land, Earth was burning, but fighting. Then the Erisors unleashed their storm. Colossal war machines dropped from orbit. Towering constructs of metal and bone weapons that could level mountains. One landed outside a human stronghold and fired a single beam, tearing half a valley apart. Defenders scattered, screaming. Yet even then, they returned, crawling back through fire and rubble to strike at its legs with rockets, grenades, whatever they had. Mara saw this from above and dove into the storm, her sentinel crashing into the machine's chest light, exploding in a shockwave that tore it down. She staggered from the wreck but rose again. Her ship cracked, her mind screaming, yet her will unbroken. In the command center, Chen held fast, her eyes scanning endless reports, casualties mounting, weapons failing. She felt the weight of every death, yet her voice never broke. She gave orders, calm, clear, sharp, holding her officers together like stone in the tide. She whispered to herself, "They want us to break, but we will not. We will never." The battle raged for hours, the Erisors pressing harder, fleets circling Earth like wolves. But slowly, impossibly, the humans held, not without loss. Ships shattered cities, burned millions, cried out in grief. But the line held. Sentinel pilots cut down wave after wave. Cannons destroyed ship after ship on the ground. Soldiers rose again and again from rubble, striking back with fury. No calculation, no machine could predict. Then came the turning point. Scientists in the hidden base unlocked the final code of the alien shard, a weapon not of fire, but of silence, a signal that could disrupt, erase a command, bind their ships in confusion. Chen listened as the scientists begged her to use it, warning it could burn out every system across Earth, destroy power, destroy life itself. She stood silent a long time, then said, "Send it. Across." The world antennas turned satellites, realigned. The signal burst into the void, a low hum, rising into a scream. Invisible but endless aerosaur ships staggered their lines, breaking apart, their great weapons stuttering. Mara felt the whispers in her, head shriek, and then weaken, her ship shaking as if something had been torn away. She gasped as silence filled her mind for the first time since she had entered the Sentinel. She was free, human ships, struck with everything they had, taking advantage. Of the confusion, Sentinel pilots tore through scattered fleets, missiles, hit command ships one after another, explosions lighting the void. The aerosaurs roared in rage, their storm faltering, their formation broken. For the first time, the annihilation fleet began to retreat, dragging shattered ships with them back into the dark. On the ground, soldiers cheered civilians, wept, smoke still filled the skies, cities still lay in ruin. But the shadows were lifting. Admiral Chen leaned against the table, her hands trembling but her voice strong. She said, "We have held, we are still here." Mara landed her Sentinel, stepping out, blood on her lips, eyes haunted but clear. She whispered to the crowd that gathered, "We are human, and we will never kneel." The aerosaurs were not destroyed. Their fleets still vast, their rage unending, but they had been stopped by prey. They had once hunted by a world they thought would break, and now across the galaxy the story spread. The humans had faced the storm and still stood. Other species, listening in silence, began to wonder if perhaps this was not the end of humanity, but the beginning of something greater. On Earth, people began to rebuild ruins, turning into strongholds, ashes into foundations. They buried their dead with tears and honor, and vowed never to forget the day the hunters tried to erase them and failed. Mara walked among them, scarred but alive. Admiral Chen stood watching the sky, knowing the war was not over, but also knowing Earth had proven itself. Final words passed through radios and voices across the planet, carried by soldiers, by children, by survivors alike. We are still standing, and as long as we stand, the galaxy will know humanity is not prey. Humanity is the defender, and in the dark, beyond stars, the aerosaurs screamed in fury, but also in fear, for they had seen the impossible, and they knew the fire of Earth would not be extinguished.